Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Years ago, during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, President Bill Clinton said it depends on what the definition of is. Well, with Trump Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and the GOP tax and spending bill, it depends on what the definition of saves is.
This bill saves $1.6 trillion for the American taxpayer. It saves more than any bill that has ever passed Capitol Hill has. In fact, by double. The next bill saved $800 billion. This bill saves $1.6 trillion.
While it's true the bill cuts Medicaid, student loan funding, climate change projects, and other spending, the bill costs the U.S. government even more through tax cuts for the wealthy and extra defense spending. Altogether, the bill will borrow $3.1 trillion we don't have, and the borrowing could go even higher.
So even without this tax bill, the deficit was essentially going to keep going up over the next 10 years, maybe come down a little bit at the very end, but essentially up. Then you add in the tax bill that we just talked about, including the fact that they've played the same gimmick they played in 2017, setting up some of these things to expire, and that would make the deficit impact higher, but not as high as if you made all this stuff permanent. The record of Congress, stuff almost always gets made permanent, and so somewhere along in here, they will make this permanent and will end up on this line. And this line is something like $25 trillion of additional debt.
$25 trillion of new debt on top of the $36.2 trillion we have now, which is already the most debt of any country in the world. That path is freaking out the bond market, which is losing confidence in the United States under Trump and under the GOP. We'll get to that in a moment, but first back to the GOP bill, which just cleared the House.
This is a very good bill for the American people, the American taxpayer.
Actually, it's only good for the wealthiest taxpayers.
The top 20% of Americans, you're going to get roughly a 3.7% increase in your after-tax income, really all from these tax cuts. But if you go all the way to the bottom and everything in between essentially leads you to the bottom, if you're in the bottom 20%, you actually lose $800. Why do you lose $800? You get a very small tax cut, and you get a very large cut in Medicaid and these other benefits that we were just talking about that affects the 20% disproportionately.
And when you cut Medicaid and Medicare, people have to pay more out of pocket. Also, under this bill, the new work requirements for Medicaid will mean millions of Americans will lose their health coverage.
You go back over here before Obamacare went into effect, when we had over 45 million uninsured Americans, it went down, 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 down. In here was Trump 1.0 with his first effort to impose work requirements on Medicaid recipients, so some people became uninsured. Down, down, down again, and now we're looking at taking it back up here and essentially reversing something like 10 years of progress in having fewer and fewer Americans without medical coverage.
Now, let's go back to the more immediate concerns about this GOP bill. When the government spends more money than it collects, it creates a deficit. To cover this deficit, the government borrows more money, increasing the size of the overall debt. To cover this debt and to help the U.S. government borrow money, the Treasury Department sells various types of debt securities. Investors purchase these securities, and the U.S. government promises to repay the investors with interest. These debt securities include Treasury bills, which mature within 1 year, Treasury notes, which mature between 2 and 10 years, and Treasury bonds, which are long-term and mature between 20 and 30 years. These U.S. debt securities have long been considered the safest assets in the world because the risk of the United States failing to repay its investors has been very low. For decades, the U.S. has been big, stable, and reliable, but now bond market investors are getting nervous. They are raising bond market yields. In other words, they are making it more expensive for the United States government to borrow.
Is this the bond market saying, whoa, a little too high?
I think so. I think the bond market's saying, guys, we need to do something here, right? We talked about the Doge. I thought you guys were going to get this under control. Now we're spending more money. Why are we doing this? We don't want you to do this. We want you to show some fiscal discipline. Let's see it.
And keep in mind, when the bond market makes it costlier for the U.S. government to borrow money, it becomes costlier for American consumers and businesses to borrow money as well. And as we've already seen, borrowing costs are increasing for credit cards, auto loans, mortgages, and business loans. Some of the bond market shakiness was sparked recently by the influential Moody's credit ratings agency. Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit rating. And in the wake of that move, an auction for Treasury securities went horribly for the U.S. government. Bond market investors and analysts call it a warning.
But we've already seen in the last couple of weeks, and particularly this week, especially after the Moody's downgrade, that there's been this narrative of concerns, which has been like a hum which has been growing louder and louder, of concerns around the deficit. Now, if we had spoken maybe 3 or 4 months ago, at the end of last year maybe, and somebody had said, when does the US really need to confront its debt issues? A lot of people would have said, you've got another decade or so. Increasingly, it feels like this administration is going to have to confront the problems because the bond market has lost patience, and it's really going to force the issue through to make sure that there is some realization that continuing to expand its deficit, its debt numbers indefinitely, is simply not something which can continue.
The bond market has also been spooked, according to analysts, by Donald Trump's lack of credibility. Trump's approach to tariffs has been on again, off again, on again, causing unpredictability and chaos. And even on the deficit, Trump recently proclaimed this.
I'm a fiscal hawk. I'm a bigger fiscal hawk. There's nobody like me as a fiscal hawk.
There's nobody like Trump as a fiscal hawk. Well, the GOP bill that Trump supports would have the United States government borrow trillions of dollars to pay for tax cuts for the rich. And even the bond market is calling out Trump's BS. Donald Trump, Caroline Leavitt, and the rest of the team can use whatever words they want. But the people who have invested in U.S. bonds, including foreign investors, are losing confidence in the full faith and credit of the United States under Trump. And that's ricocheting across the U.S. economy, hurting America's standing, and increasing the odds of a U.S. financial meltdown. By the way, some of Donald Trump's staff believe he has dementia, and that explains the increase in his rambling and temper tantrums.
You to get out of here. What does this have to do with the Qatari jet? They're giving the United States Air Force a jet, okay? And it's a great thing. We're talking about a lot of other things. It's NBC trying to get off the subject of what you just saw. You are a real, you're a terrible reporter. Number one, you don't have what it takes to be a reporter. You're not smart enough. But for you to go into a subject about a jet that was given to the United States Air Force, which is a very nice thing. No more questions from you. Go ahead. Go ahead, talk about that. His name is Peter something. He's a terrible reporter. Quiet.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from Lawrence, who wrote, "When did the Constitution and Bill of Rights become Donald Trump's toilet paper?" Good question. I look forward to reading your comments about Donald Trump and his team flailing as the all-important bond market recoils over the GOP debt bomb. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.